My ex stalked me for 15 years, claiming I was her daughter's father. But when I discovered she did the same to 4 other men, we joined forces and took her to court for the DNA test they never saw coming. I'm 37 years old. I work in construction as a project supervisor. And honestly, I need to get this story off my chest. Because what happened to me with my ex-girlfriend Vanessa is something that sounds so ridiculous that people don't believe me until I show them all the court papers. Basically, this woman spent over 15 years saying I was the father of her daughter, harassing me, showing up at my work, at the grocery store, everywhere with the kid. And the worst part is, it wasn't just me. I mean, it turns out she did the same thing to like 4 other guys. Yeah, you read that right. 4 other guys. But I'm going to start from the beginning, because otherwise, this doesn't make sense. I met Vanessa when I was like 21 years old. Maybe 22. I don't even remember exactly anymore. I was working in construction, but I wasn't a supervisor yet. I was basically just another worker, taking any contract that came up. Vanessa worked at a restaurant near where I lived at the time, and honestly, at first, she seemed normal, pretty, friendly. We got along well. We dated for like 6 or 7 months. Nothing special, but it wasn't a super serious relationship either, you know what I mean? I was focused on my work because at that time I was trying to save money and get better contracts, and she was always talking about having kids and getting married and all those things. But I was like, dude, I'm 22 years old. Let me live a little first. The thing is, at that time I got this amazing contract in another state. It was for a big construction project and they were going to pay me really well. But I had to leave for like 5 or 6 weeks. I don't remember exactly how long, but it was more than a month for sure. I told Vanessa I was leaving, that it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up, and she got all dramatic saying how could I leave her alone for so long and whatever. Honestly, I thought maybe the relationship was going to end because she was being really intense about it, but, well, I left anyway because I needed the money. When I came back, literally like 2 days after returning, Vanessa calls me and tells me she needs to see me urgently. We met at a cafe, and she drops the bomb on me. She tells me I'm pregnant. And I just sat there like processing the information, because, well, okay, we had sex and these things happen, but then she tells me she's between 4 and 7 weeks pregnant. And that's where my brain clicked, because I was gone for 5 or 6 weeks, so if she was 4 weeks pregnant, that meant she got pregnant when I wasn't there. I told her, wait, the timing doesn't add up for me, and she got super defensive saying maybe the doctors got the dates wrong, that it happens sometimes, whatever. I told her, look, if it's mine, obviously I'm going to take responsibility, but I need us to get a paternity test when the baby is born, because this isn't adding up for me at all. Vanessa went crazy, started screaming in the cafe that I was accusing her of cheating, that, how could I doubt her, that she would never cheat on me, all the drama. I stood firm and told her, okay, perfect. If there's nothing to hide, then there's no problem with the test, right? But she kept refusing and refusing, saying it was an insult, that if I loved her, I wouldn't ask for that. Basically, expert-level emotional manipulation. So I ended the relationship there. I told her, look, Vanessa, this is over. I can't be with someone who refuses to do something as simple as a test if they have nothing to hide. She didn't accept the breakup. I mean, she literally told me no. I don't accept that we're breaking up. We're going to stay together. And I was like, what? No, it doesn't work like that. This isn't a democracy. I'm breaking up with you, and that's it. I left from there and honestly thought that with time she'd get over it and leave me alone. How naive I was. Seriously. Vanessa had the baby. She named her Natalie. And from the moment she was born, I started telling everyone that I was the father and that I had abandoned them. She told her friends, her family, random people that I was a bad man who had left his pregnant girlfriend and didn't want to take responsibility for my daughter. The story she told was that I had gone to work in another state, and when I came back and found out about the pregnancy, I ran away and never wanted to know anything again. Obviously, she omitted the part where the dates didn't match, and she refused to get the paternity test. What came next was basically 15 years of nightmare. Vanessa started showing up everywhere with Natalie. She'd see me at the grocery store and approach with the kids saying, look, Natalie, that's your dad, say hi to him. She'd show up at my work, and when I say show up, I don't mean she'd pass by casually. No. She'd arrive with the kid and put on a whole show in front of my coworkers and my bosses. There were times I literally had to ask security to remove them because she'd start yelling things at me like coward, bad father, all those things, and the poor kid there in the middle not understanding anything. I had to get restraining orders, and I don't know if you know how that works, but basically I had to renew them every 2 years. So every 2 years I had to go to court again and explain the whole situation again and show evidence that she was still harassing me. It was exhausting, seriously, because she always found ways to violate the order without it being so obvious. She'd stand at a certain distance, where technically she wasn't violating the order, but close enough for me to see her and feel uncomfortable. Or she'd have her friends send me messages on her behalf. It was total madness for years. What saved me, and this is the craziest part of the whole story, was my friend Philip. Philip and I had been friends since high school. We were close, but we didn't see each other all the time because he lived in another city. One day, I think it was like 8 or 9 years after all this drama, we met at a bar to catch up, and I was telling him this whole situation with Vanessa because at that time, she had just shown up at my work again, and I was super frustrated. Philip was listening to me, and suddenly he went quiet, with a face like, I can't believe it. And he tells me, dude, describe your ex. I said, why? And he tells me, just describe her. So I gave him all the details, her full name, what she looked like, where she used to work, everything. Philip was shocked and told me that an acquaintance of his, a guy named Wade, had told him exactly the same story years ago, exactly the same, like word for word. Wade had also dated Vanessa. She also told him she was pregnant, also refused the paternity test, also harassed him for years saying he was Natalie's father. I just sat there speechless, literally couldn't process what I was hearing. I told Philip I needed to talk to Wade, to please give me his contact. I met Wade like a week later, and it was surreal, seriously, because he told me his version of the story and it was like listening to myself. Even the details were the same, the way Vanessa refused the test, how she'd show up at his work, everything. Wade told me he had also had to get restraining orders and that he had basically accepted that this was going to be his life forever. But then we started investigating together, asking around, searching social media, talking to people who knew Vanessa, and you won't believe what we discovered. There were more men. Not just Wade and me, there were like 3 other guys we found who had exactly the same story. One was named Caleb, and that poor man had even given Vanessa money for years, thinking maybe he was Natalie's father and he was doing the right thing. Another guy hadn't even really dated her. They'd only had like 1 or 2 dates, and suddenly Vanessa started telling him he was the father. It was like a massive fraud operation or something. I don't even know what to call it. We all got together, and when I say all of us, it was like 5 men, including me, all with the same story about Vanessa. We decided we had to do something legal, something definitive, because this was already too much. We hired a lawyer among all of us, shared the expenses, and filed a case in court against Vanessa. We weren't looking for money or anything. We just wanted a judge to order a mandatory paternity test for all of us, and for this to end once and for all. The day of the hearing, Vanessa arrived with Natalie, who at that time was already like 15 years old, almost 16, I think. The girl looked confused. Obviously, because there were 5 men there, and her mom had spent years telling her that each one of us was her father at different times. The judge listened to all our testimonies, saw all the restraining orders, saw all the messages and evidence of harassment, and basically told Vanessa that this was going to be resolved today, that mandatory paternity tests were going to be done. Vanessa started protesting, saying this was unfair, that we were attacking her, that she knew who the father was and didn't need tests. The judge, who honestly was a very patient man, told her, ma'am, if you know who the father is, then there's no problem with the tests, right? It's the same argument I had given her 15 years earlier. Vanessa had no choice. The judge ordered the tests, and they told us the results would be ready in like 2 or 3 weeks. Those weeks were eternal, I swear. I knew I wasn't the father. I mean, the math didn't add up from the beginning. But after 15 years of harassment and her calling me a bad father and all those things, part of me was afraid that somehow, miraculously, I was the father, and then all this hell would have been for nothing. But at the same time, I knew it was impossible, so it was like being in a very weird emotional limbo. The day of the results came, and we all went back to court and started reading one by one. Garrett, not the father. Wade, not the father. Caleb, not the father. Like that with everyone, none of us was Natalie's father. Vanessa sat there in silence while the judge read the results, and when he finished, she started screaming that the tests were wrong, that they had mixed up the samples, that this was a conspiracy against her. The judge told her that the tests had been done at a certified laboratory, that there was no possible error, and that she had been harassing 5 innocent men for over 15 years with false accusations. He increased all our restraining orders, gave her more severe legal consequences if she violated them again, and basically told her she had wasted the court's time and should be ashamed. I felt like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. Seriously, it was 15 years of my life dealing with this madness, and I finally had official proof that I had nothing to do with Natalie. But Vanessa didn't stay calm. After we left the Plaza's court, she was waiting for us outside and started yelling horrible things at us, followed us to the parking lot, violating the restraining order, literally minutes after the judge told her not to do it. We had to call the police and they took her away, arrested right there. It was a pretty dramatic ending to that whole circus. Like a week after that, I received a letter at my house. It was from Natalie's great-grandmother. Her name was Beatrice, and she was an elderly lady. I think she was like 75 years old or something. In the letter, she apologized to me on behalf of her family, told me she had never believed Vanessa's version, but hadn't been able to do anything because Vanessa was very manipulative. She told me that after what happened in court, she had fought for custody of Natalie, and a judge had given it to her, so now Natalie lived with her and Vanessa no longer had access to the girl. Beatrice also told me she had cut off all the financial support she was giving Vanessa, that she had basically left her alone to face the consequences of her actions. Along with that letter came another letter, and this one was from Natalie. The poor girl wrote to me saying she was very sorry, that she didn't know her mom had been lying all that time, that her life had been very confusing because her mom told her different things depending on the day. She told me she didn't know who her real dad was, that she didn't know who she really was, and that she felt like her whole life had been a lie. Honestly, it broke my heart to read that letter because Natalie was a victim in all this, as much as we were, maybe more. I didn't respond to that letter immediately because I didn't know what to tell her. I mean, this girl had grown up thinking I was her father. I had been in her life in a very twisted way for 15 years, but at the same time, I had spent all that time trying to keep her away from me because I knew she wasn't my daughter. It was a very emotionally complicated situation. Like, 6 months passed and Natalie wrote to me again. By then, she was already 16 years old. In this letter, she told me she was going to therapy, that her great-grandmother was helping her a lot, but that she needed to find her real father because she felt she couldn't move forward with her life without knowing where she really came from. She asked me if I could help her look for her real dad, that she understood we didn't have any relationship, but that she didn't know who else to turn to because her mom kept refusing to say who he was. I talked to Beatrice first because I wanted to make sure this was a good idea and that I wasn't going to add more drama to Natalie's life. Beatrice told me she thought it was a good idea, that Natalie needed answers and deserved to know the truth, so I agreed to help. We met, Natalie, Beatrice, and I, and started putting together information. Beatrice had some old photos from when Vanessa was pregnant, and in one of those photos there was a man that none of us knew. Natalie didn't know him either. We did some investigating, and it turns out that man's name was Richard. We found him on social media. He lived in another state, but not too far. I sent him a message explaining the whole situation, that I know it sounds crazy, but we needed to know if he knew Vanessa and if it was possible he was Natalie's father. Richard responded like the next day and told me, yes, that he had known Vanessa many years ago, that they had briefly dated but she disappeared suddenly and he never knew why. I told him we needed him to take a paternity test, that we would pay for everything, that we just wanted to know the truth. Richard agreed to take the test. Another 2 or 3 weeks of super tense waiting, because this time we really had no idea what was going to come out. The results arrived and Richard was the father, 99.9% probability. Natalie finally had the answer she had been looking for her whole life. Richard turned out to be a good guy. He was married and had 2 other kids. But when he found out Natalie was his daughter, he agreed to meet her and start building a relationship with her. It was weird to see them together the first time because Natalie looked a lot like him. They had the same eyes and the same face shape, things that were obvious once you saw them side by side. Vanessa, to this day, still denies that Richard is the father. According to Beatrice, Vanessa goes around saying that DNA tests are fake, that there's a conspiracy against her, that the 5 of us men got together to ruin her life. She hasn't tried to contact me directly because she knows if she does, she'll end up in jail, but apparently she keeps telling her version of the story to whoever wants to listen. It's not my problem anymore, honestly. Natalie is now 18 years old, still lives with her great-grandmother, but spends time with Richard and her half-siblings. Every once in a while she sends me update messages, thanking me for helping her find her real dad, and I always respond wishing her the best. We don't have a close relationship or anything because it would be weird considering everything that happened, but I'm glad to know she's doing well and that she finally has answers. Wade and the other guys also moved on with their lives. I think one of them even got married last year. I'm still working in construction. I'm a project supervisor now, like I told you at the beginning. And every time someone asks me if I have kids, I say no. Sometimes people who know the story tell me that, technically, I was a father figure in Natalie's life for 15 years, even if it was in a super twisted way. But I don't see it that way. I was a victim of Vanessa's harassment, just like Natalie. The difference is that I chose to stay away knowing the truth, while Natalie had no choice but to live in the middle of all that lie. I don't know what goes through someone's head to do something like that. To lie to 5 different men for years, to use your own daughter as a manipulation tool, to refuse to accept the truth even when you have DNA evidence in your face. I guess Vanessa has her own psychological problems that she's never going to deal with because to this day she still thinks she's the victim in this whole story. And maybe in her distorted mind she really believes it. Who knows? What I do know is that it's not my problem anymore. I spent 15 years of my life dealing with that madness. Lost job opportunities because she'd show up and make scenes. Had relationships that ended because the women I was dating didn't want to deal with that drama. Spent money on lawyers and restraining orders and DNA tests. But in the end, I came out victorious. I mean, not in a grandiose way or anything. But I came out free from that situation and with my name clear. That's enough for me.